The auction clock hit 0 the moment Alina Carter stopped breathing. The final bid flashed across the screen, $500,000, and the room went silent except for the soft chime confirming the sale. Alina stared at the number, her hands trembling so badly she had to clasp them together to stop them from shaking. Somewhere behind the mirrored glass, men she would never see had just decided the price of her body, of her future, of her last untouched piece of herself. She swallowed hard. "Lot confirmed," the woman beside her said calmly, as if announcing a dinner reservation. "You'll receive the buyer's instructions shortly." Alina nodded, though her ears were ringing. Her mind wasn't in the luxury hotel suite or the velvet-lined chair beneath her. It was in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. It was in the image of her mother lying still, tubes threaded into her skull, a doctor's voice saying words like aggressive and inoperable and weeks instead of months. $500,000. That number was the difference between hope and a funeral. Alina had told herself she wouldn't think about what came after the auction. She had told herself she would survive this one night and then disappear, pay the hospital, save her mother, go back to being invisible. But now the after was here. Her phone buzzed. Unknown contact, penthouse, 1 hour, no delays. Her stomach twisted. An hour later, Alina stood alone in the elevator of a glass tower overlooking the city, her reflection staring back at her from every angle. She looked older than 22. Her dark hair was pulled back too tightly, her dress too simple for a building like this. She pressed her palms together, whispering a silent apology to the girl she used to be. The elevator doors opened into silence. The penthouse was massive, all glass and steel, with the city sprawled beneath it like something owned. Alina took a step forward, heels echoing too loudly on the marble floor. A man stood near the windows, his back to her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. He didn't turn immediately. Instead, he took a slow breath, as if grounding himself. "You're early," he said, his voice low, controlled. "I didn't want to be late," Alina replied. Her voice barely sounded like her own. He turned then. "Kang Yimin." She recognized him instantly, though she had only ever seen his face in business magazines and whispered headlines. CEO, strategist, ice-cold negotiator, a man who acquired companies the way others collected watches. Up close, his presence was heavier, not aggressive, not loud, just absolute. "You can leave if you want," he said suddenly. The words hit her like a slap. "What?" "I said you can leave." His dark eyes studied her, sharp but unreadable. "I won't stop you." Alina laughed, a brittle sound that surprised even her. "I can't." "You can," he corrected calmly. "The money will still be transferred." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Then why am I here?" "Because you chose to be." He paused. "And so did I." Silence stretched between them. Alina took a shaky breath. "I don't want you to think I do this all the time." "I don't," he said immediately. That startled her. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you weren't the highest profile listing," he said. "I know you didn't include staged photos or rehearsed lines, and I know you almost withdrew twice before the auction closed." Her throat tightened. "Then why did you bid?" For the first time, something flickered across his face. Hesitation. "I don't usually," he said, "attend auctions like that." "But you did." "Yes." "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of clean soap and something sharper beneath it. He poured 2 glasses of water at the counter, then handed one to her. "You looked like someone standing on the edge of something," he said quietly. "Not looking for escape, looking for a reason to jump." Her hands shook as she took the glass. "My mother is dying." He nodded once, as if that confirmed something he already knew. They didn't speak after that. What followed was nothing like the fear Alina had imagined in the weeks leading up to this night. There was intensity, yes, and vulnerability she hadn't expected from either of them. There was hesitation. There was a strange, careful tenderness that made her chest ache in ways she didn't understand. When it was over, Alina lay staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into her hair. She dressed quickly, keeping her back turned. "It didn't have to be like that," she said, her voice tight. "No," Yimin agreed, "but I'm glad it was." She flinched at that. By the time she reached the elevator, her phone chimed again. A deposit notification. The full amount, already transferred. Her knees nearly buckled. The next morning, Alina sat beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her fragile hand as doctors spoke with renewed urgency and optimism. Treatment plans were rewritten. Surgeons were called in. Time was suddenly something they had again. Alina smiled through her tears. She told herself it was over. 3 days later, her phone rang. Unknown contact. She almost didn't answer. "Elena Carter," Yimin said on the other end. "I have a proposal." Her stomach dropped. "I told you that night was all I could do." "I know," he said. "That's not what I'm asking." She closed her eyes. 6 months, he continued. 50,000 a month, no public appearances, no emotional expectations, complete discretion, exclusivity. Her chest tightened. "You're asking me to be." "I'm asking you to be honest," he interrupted. "With yourself and with me." She was silent for a long moment. "Why?" she whispered. "Because walking away felt like a mistake," he said simply. "And I don't make those often." Alina looked at her mother, sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. Then she made another choice that would change everything. Alina didn't answer immediately. She sat in the hospital stairwell long after the call ended, her phone resting in her lap like it weighed 100 pounds. 6 months. 50,000 a month. Enough to cover her mother's surgery, rehabilitation, medication, and the mountain of debt already stacked against her name. Enough to breathe. But the cost wasn't just time, it was herself, again. That night, she returned to her tiny apartment and stood in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to rinse away the memory of the penthouse, the intensity of his gaze, the way he had looked at her like she was something fragile and dangerous all at once. She told herself she could handle 6 months. She called him back. "I have conditions," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Good," Yimin replied. "So do I." They met 2 days later in a private office overlooking the river, not the penthouse. That felt intentional, strategic. He was seated at the head of a long table when she entered, a slim folder placed neatly in front of him. "No surprises," he said. "Everything is written." Elena sat across from him, refusing to let the distance intimidate her. "I don't stay overnight unless I want to." "Agreed." "No sharing me, no photos, no leverage." "Agreed." "And when the 6 months are over," she added, meeting his eyes, "it's over." He paused just briefly. "Agreed." She exhaled. The contract was clean, cold, precise. It reduced intimacy to bullet points and clauses. She signed anyway. The first time she returned to the penthouse under the agreement, Alina expected it to feel transactional, mechanical, but it didn't. Yimin cooked dinner himself, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled, as if he hadn't realized he was doing something domestic until it was already happening. "You don't have staff?" she asked. "I do," he said. "I don't use them here." "Why?" "This is the only place I don't feel watched." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. They ate quietly at first, the city glowing beyond the windows. Eventually, he asked, "How is your mother?" Alina blinked. "Better," she smiled today. "That hasn't happened in months." He nodded, as if that mattered more than the quarterly reports lighting up his phone on the counter. As the weeks passed, a rhythm formed. She came twice a week, sometimes more, sometimes less, always on her terms. They talked. That was the part Alina hadn't anticipated. Yimin spoke of pressure that never slept, of family expectations that felt more binding than contracts, of a life measured in acquisitions and losses rather than days. He listened when she spoke about nursing school, about holding strangers' hands as they died, about learning how to stay calm while everything fell apart. "You don't look at me like I'm temporary," she said one night, curled against the couch, the space between them smaller than usual. "Because you're not," he replied without hesitation. That scared her more than anything else. She began to notice the small things, the way he watched her leave, never stopping her, the way his jaw tightened when her phone buzzed with unknown numbers after the media sniffed around the hospital funding increase, the way he touched her as if memorizing her, careful and intense all at once. One evening, she arrived to find him packing. "They announced the engagement," he said. Her heart stuttered. "What?" "It was finalized today." His voice was flat, controlled. "My family insisted." Alina felt something cold bloom in her chest. "You're engaged?" "Yes." "To someone else?" "Yes." She stood slowly. "You didn't think that was something I should know?" "I was going to tell you." "When?" Her voice shook despite her effort. "After the wedding." He turned to face her fully. "It's not real." She laughed, sharp and hollow. "It's real enough for the press." "I don't love her," he said. "That doesn't make this better," Alina snapped. "You told me this would be honest." "It is," he said. "She's a strategic necessity, nothing more." Alina grabbed her bag. "I need to leave." He didn't stop her. That night, she cried in her car, gripping the steering wheel until her hands ached. She told herself she'd been stupid, that she'd forgotten the rules, that she'd mistaken kindness for commitment. The next morning, her name was everywhere. Not fully exposed, not yet, but hints, speculation, anonymous leaks about hospital donations tied to corporate funds. Her inbox flooded with messages that swung wildly between praise and accusation. Yeeman called her 3 times. She didn't answer. When she finally did, days later, her voice was quiet. "Your world is eating me alive." "Then let me burn it down," he said. She went still. "You don't mean that." "I do," he replied. "I'll end it, the engagement, all of it." "Don't," she whispered. "Not for me." "Not for you," he agreed. "For myself." The fallout was immediate. Board members resigned. Stock prices dipped. Lawsuits followed like sharks scenting blood. His name was dragged across headlines with words like reckless and compromised. Alina watched it all from the sidelines, guilt and fear twisting together in her chest. Then the threats started. Voicemails, messages sent to her classmates, photos of her entering the hospital, warnings wrapped in politeness. Yi Min moved her into a different apartment without asking. "I don't want your protection," she told him angrily. "You already have it," he replied, "whether you want it or not." When her mother collapsed again from stress-induced complications, Alina broke. Yi Min arranged a private medical transfer overnight, a secluded facility, no reporters, no leaks. On a quiet shoreline miles from the city, Alina watched the waves crash against black sand as Yi Min stood beside her. "I don't know how to survive this," she admitted. He reached for her hand, steady and warm. "Then don't survive it alone." For the first time, she believed him. And somewhere far away, someone decided he would pay for that belief. The island felt like a pause in the world. No cameras, no alerts buzzing every few seconds, just wind, salt, and the steady rhythm of waves hitting the shore. Alina sat on the wooden steps outside the private clinic, arms wrapped around herself, watching the sky fade from orange to bruised purple. Inside, her mother slept under careful monitoring, the machines quiet, the staff discreet. For the first time in weeks, Alina wasn't bracing for the next crisis. Yi Min joined her without a word, holding 2 paper cups of tea. He handed her one, then sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You didn't have to do all this," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "That's not an answer." "It is," he said, "just not the one you're used to." She studied his profile, the tension in his jaw, the way his gaze never fully rested. "What happens when this place stops being safe?" "Then we find another," he said, and another after that. You can't keep running. I'm not, he said. I'm choosing. The word lingered between them. Days passed in a fragile calm. Alina spent her mornings with her mother, reading aloud, brushing her hair, listening to stories she'd already heard 100 times but never tired of. In the afternoons, she studied. In the evenings, she walked the shore with Yimin, their conversations drifting from trivial to painfully honest. One night, as they stood ankle-deep in the surf, Alina finally asked the question that had been burning her alive. Why me? He didn't answer right away. When I was younger, he said slowly, I believed control was safety. If I could predict everything, nothing could hurt me. She waited. You were unpredictable, he continued. Not reckless, not naive, just real. And when I realized I cared, I tried to put rules around it, contracts, distance. And, she asked. And it didn't work. Her throat tightened. The press didn't stay away forever. It started with speculation about his resignation. Then anonymous sources confirmed the broken engagement. Then someone leaked Alina's name. Not fully, not yet, but enough. A reporter showed up at the edge of the island 2 mornings later. Yimin handled it himself. You should leave, he told the man calmly, before this becomes a legal problem. The reporter smiled thinly. People are curious. So am I, Yimin replied, about how fast defamation cases move these days. The man left, but the damage was done. That night, Alina found Yimin staring at his phone, unread messages stacked one after another. They're filing charges, he said. Financial misconduct, embezzlement. She felt the blood drain from her face. That's insane. It's effective, he said. She grabbed his hand. Tell me what to do. He squeezed back. Stay here, focus on your mother. I'm not leaving you, she said fiercely. He looked at her then, really looked at her. If this turns ugly. It already has, she interrupted, and I'm still here. 2 days later, they married. There was no grand proposal, no ring at first, just a quiet conversation in the early morning as sunlight crept through the curtains of the small guest house near the clinic. If this is about protection, Alina began. It's not, Yimin said. If this is about strategy. It's not. She swallowed. Then why? Because every version of the future that doesn't include you feels like another kind of prison. They stood barefoot on the sand that afternoon, Alina in a simple white dress borrowed from a nurse who smiled knowingly, Yimin in rolled-up slacks and an open shirt. Her mother watched from a wheelchair, tears sliding down her cheeks. I always wanted to see this, she whispered to Alina afterward. I just didn't know who with. Alina laughed through her tears. Neither did I. For a moment, it felt like they had outrun fate. Then the arrest came. It happened at dawn. Alina woke to shouting, to heavy footsteps, to the sound of metal on wood. She ran into the main room to see men in dark jackets flashing badges, their expressions already decided. Yimin Kang, one of them said, you're under arrest. Alina screamed his name. It's okay, he said calmly, even as they pulled his hands behind his back. Listen to me, this is exactly what they want. They can't do this, she cried. It's false. They can, he replied gently, but they won't win. As they dragged him away, he turned back once. Take care of her, he told Alina's mother. Then he was gone. The days that followed blurred into something gray and heavy. Alina split her time between hospital visits, lawyers' offices, and prison visitation rooms that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Yimin never complained. They're isolating you, she said during one visit, glass between them. They're trying, he replied. It's not working. I'm scared, she admitted. He pressed his palm to the glass. I know. I don't know how to do this alone. You're not alone, he said. You're just carrying it for now. Weeks passed, then months. Evidence began to surface. Whistleblowers came forward. Financial trails unraveled. The accusations lost their shine. The day Yimin walked free, thinner but unbroken, Alina collapsed into his arms outside the courthouse, sobbing. "I told you," he murmured into her hair. "They wouldn't win." They didn't stay. Within weeks, they boarded a flight under assumed privacy, heading for a country where no one knew their names and no one cared who they used to be. In a quiet coastal town half a world away, Alina gave birth to their daughter. They named her Myra. As Alina held the tiny, squirming life against her chest, Yimin knelt beside the bed, tears streaming freely down his face. "I didn't know peace could look like this," he whispered. Alina smiled weakly. "It does now." And for the first time since the auction clock hit 0, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after Myra was born. It became quieter, slower, and in many ways harder, but it was real. They rented a modest house near the water, nothing like the glass towers Yimin once ruled. Alina learned the rhythms of early motherhood on little sleep, packing the floor at night while the ocean whispered outside their windows. Yimin woke every time Myra cried, no matter how exhausted he was, taking her gently, rocking her with an awkward patience that made Alina's chest ache. "You don't have to do every feeding," Alina whispered one night. "I know," he said softly. "I want to." He took a temporary consulting role under a different name, refusing to step back into the kind of power that had nearly destroyed them. Alina returned to her studies, juggling coursework with diapers and doctor visits for her mother, who had stabilized enough to join them abroad. For a while, the world left them alone. Then Alina got sick. It started as exhaustion she couldn't explain, nausea that lingered even after the nights got easier. She blamed stress, sleeplessness, everything except the truth. The test strip turned positive in seconds. She sat on the bathroom floor, staring at it, her hands shaking harder than they had the night of the auction. When she told Yimin, he laughed first, soft, disbelieving, and then cried, pulling her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted, "but I'm also happy." "So am I," he said, terrified but happy. Their second daughter arrived just over a year later, loud and stubborn from her first breath. They named her Hannah, meaning hope, because that was what she had felt like the moment Alina realized she wasn't alone anymore, not truly. Yimin changed in ways Alina hadn't expected. He learned patience. He learned how to lose an argument without needing to win it later. He learned how to kneel on the floor and let two small humans climb over him like he was a jungle gym. "You used to terrify entire boardrooms," Alina teased one afternoon as he lay pinned under Myra and Hannah. He smiled up at their daughters. "This is harder." They laughed more. They fought less. When they did fight, it wasn't about power or control. It was about fear, about protecting something fragile. Years passed. Alina finished nursing school and took shifts at a local clinic, finding comfort in helping others heal when her own life had once felt so broken. Yimin started a small business focused on ethical consulting, turning down lucrative contracts that smelled even faintly of the old world. Then, just when they allowed themselves to believe the past had loosened its grip, Alina's mother collapsed again. The diagnosis came back fast and brutal: recurrence, aggressive, unforgiving. Alina sat at her bedside, holding the same hand she had held in that first hospital years ago, her heart breaking in the same place. "I'm tired," her mother whispered one night, voice thin but peaceful. Alina shook her head. "Don't say that." "I'm not afraid," she said gently. "I saw you build a life. I saw my grandchildren laugh. I didn't think I'd get that." Yimin stood behind Alina, one hand resting steady on her shoulder. "I'm grateful," her mother continued, "even for the parts that hurt." She passed quietly 2 weeks later, with Alina and Yimin on either side of her bed. Grief didn't come all at once. It came in waves, in empty chairs, in recipes Alina couldn't bring herself to cook. Yimin never tried to fix it. He just stayed. 3 years after Myra's birth, Alina found out she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with laughter instead of fear. Their son arrived in the middle of a thunderstorm, loud and relentless, fists clenched like he was already ready to fight the world. They named him James, after no one special, because this time the name didn't need to carry history. They were a family. It was James who finally brought them back. Just to visit, Yeeman said one night, years after they had fled. We don't have to stay. Alina hesitated. The thought of returning made her chest tighten. But something else stirred too, closure. They went quietly, no press, no announcements. The city looked the same and completely different. The hotel still stood where it always had, glass reflecting the sky like nothing had ever happened. Alina stopped across the street, her breath catching. This is where it started, she said softly. Yeeman nodded, and where it ended. They didn't go inside. They held hands and walked away. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to the coast where they had first hidden from the world. Just the two of them this time. No children, no obligations. I didn't think we'd make it, Alina admitted as they watched the sun dip below the horizon. Neither did I, Yeeman said, but I kept choosing you anyway. He took her hands, older now, familiar, steady. They renewed their vows with no witnesses, no promises about forever, just honesty. Thank you, Alina whispered. For what? For seeing me when I didn't know how to see myself. He smiled, pressing his forehead to hers. You saved me too. Somewhere far away, a clock struck 0 again. But this time, it didn't mark the end of something. It marked how far they had come. The years that followed their quiet return didn't feel dramatic on the surface, but beneath every ordinary moment lived the echo of everything they had survived. Alina learned that healing wasn't a straight line. Some mornings she woke up light, steady, fully present in the life she had built. Other mornings, a smell in the clinic or a phrase on the news dragged her back to a version of herself she barely recognized. The girl sitting in front of a screen, watching a clock count down the price of her desperation. On those days, she didn't hide it. She would come home, sit at the kitchen table, and stare at nothing until Yeeman noticed. You're not back there, he would say quietly, setting his phone aside. You're here. I know, she'd whisper. Sometimes my body forgets. So he would take her hands, ground her, stay. Myra started school. Hannah followed a year later, stubborn and fearless, asking questions that made teachers pause. James grew fast, all noise and motion, trailing behind his sisters like he was terrified of missing something important. They argued about normal things now, chores, schedules, whether Myra was old enough to walk to school alone. But some arguments cut deeper. You don't have to keep protecting us from everything, Alina snapped one evening after Yeeman canceled another business opportunity. I'm not, he replied, jaw tight. I'm protecting myself. She softened then. From what? From becoming someone who forgets why this matters, he said, gesturing around the room. From becoming the man who thought power was worth more than peace. She reached for him. You're not him anymore. I know, he said. I just don't ever want to be. The past tested that promise sooner than either expected. It began with a letter. No return address, no threat, just a legal notice folded neatly inside, informing Yeeman that a civil appeal had been filed regarding his previous case. Old enemies, new tactics. Alina felt the room tilt when she read it. They won't stop, she whispered. Yeeman took the paper from her hands, reading it carefully. Then he folded it once, twice, and set it down. They're desperate, he said calmly. That's when people make mistakes. This time, they fought back differently. No hiding, no running. They hired attorneys. They cooperated fully. They told the truth, clean, documented, unafraid. And when the case was finally dismissed, with public acknowledgement of misconduct by the accusers, Alina felt something inside her loosen for the first time in years. They celebrated quietly. Takeout on the living room floor, Myra insisting on a speech, Hannah demanding dessert before dinner, James clapping for no reason at all. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Alina sat on the porch alone. Yimin joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "I don't think I've ever said this out loud," she said softly, "but I forgive myself now." He didn't speak, he just waited. "For the auction," she continued. "For the choices I made, for the shame I carried like it defined me." He took her hand. "It never did." "I know," she said, "but I needed to say it." The forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it changed how it lived inside her. Time moved the way it always does, quietly, then all at once. Myra turned 10. Hannah learned to swim. James broke his arm and cried harder from embarrassment than pain. Yimin started teaching part-time at a business ethics program, students hanging on his words without knowing the full weight behind them. Alina took on more responsibility at the clinic, her calm under pressure becoming something others relied on. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, Myra looked up suddenly. "Mom," she asked, "how did you and Dad meet?" Alina froze. Yimin met her eyes across the kitchen. "Do you want to tell them?" he asked gently. Alina took a breath. "Not everything," she said, "but enough." So she told them about two people who met during the hardest season of their lives, about choices made to protect family, about love that didn't arrive gently but stayed anyway. "Did it hurt?" Hannah asked quietly. "Yes," Alina said honestly. "Sometimes." "Was it worth it?" James asked, climbing onto a chair. Alina looked at the three of them, at Yimin standing behind them, steady and familiar. "Yes," she said, "because it led to you." That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Alina lay awake beside Yimin. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "what would have happened if you hadn't bid?" "All the time," he replied, "and then I stop." "Why?" "Because wondering doesn't change what we chose next." She smiled into the dark. The world never fully forgot them. Sometimes old articles resurfaced. Sometimes strangers recognized Yimin in airports or cafes, but the fear was gone. They had faced the worst of it and survived together. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Alina stood at her mother's grave. The children gathered close, flowers clutched in small hands. "I wish you could see them," Alina whispered. "I think you'd be proud." Yimin squeezed her shoulder. As they walked away, Alina realized something that startled her. She wasn't angry anymore. Not at the world, not at fate, not even at the girl she once was. She had made peace with her story. And that, she knew, was the real victory. Peace didn't mean nothing ever went wrong. It meant that when it did, they didn't fall apart. The first real test came quietly, the way most dangerous things do. Yimin was offered a partnership. Not a hostile takeover, not a power grab, just an invitation, clean on paper, ethical by every measurable standard. A global firm wanted him to lead a new division focused on transparency and reform. The salary was generous, the influence even more so. Alina listened as he explained it one night after the children were asleep, his voice careful, like he was handling something fragile. "You don't have to say yes," she said immediately. "I know," he replied, "but I want to know what you think." She studied him. The man he had been would have accepted without a second thought. The man he was now was asking permission, not for control, but for alignment. "I think," she said slowly, "that if you take it because you're afraid of losing relevance, it'll eat you alive." "And if I take it because I believe I can change something?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Then you already know the answer." He took the job, but with boundaries so firm the board balked at first. Remote leadership, public disclosures, exit clauses that protected his family first. For months it worked. Until it didn't. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't an accusation, not directly. It was worse, speculation. A long-form piece questioning the legitimacy of reform led by formerly disgraced executives. Alina read it once, then again, her stomach tightening. By noon, the comments were brutal. By evening, their home address appeared on a forum. Yi-min came home to find Alina sitting at the kitchen table, laptop closed, expression calm but distant. "You saw it," he said quietly. "Yes." "I'll shut it down," he said immediately. "The job, everything." She shook her head. "Not yet." He frowned. "Alina." "Listen to me," she said, meeting his eyes. "This time we don't disappear, we don't shrink." A knock sounded at the door before he could respond. 2 officers stood outside, polite, professional. "Just a precaution," one of them said. "We'll increase patrols." After they left, Yi-min exhaled sharply. "I hate this." "So do I," Alina said, "but we've survived worse." That night, Myra came into their room, eyes wide. "Are we in trouble?" she asked softly. Alina sat up immediately, pulling her daughter close. "No, we're safe." "But people are saying things," Myra whispered. Yi-min knelt beside the bed. "People say things when they're afraid of what they don't understand." "Are you bad?" Hannah asked from the doorway. The question hit Alina like a punch. "No," she said firmly. "Your father is good, and so are you." James climbed onto the bed, wrapping his arms around all of them at once. "I don't care what they say," he announced. "You're my parents." Alina closed her eyes, breathing him in. The backlash peaked and then faded as it always did. The firm issued a statement. Independent audits followed. The narrative shifted, slowly but undeniably. But something in Alina changed during that week. She realized she was tired of letting others define their story. 2 months later, she stood on a small stage at a healthcare conference, her hands trembling just slightly as she adjusted the microphone. Yi-min watched from the audience, pride sharp in his chest. "I'm not here as a victim," Alina began, "and I'm not here as a cautionary tale." The room was silent. "I'm here as a nurse," she continued, voice steadying. "As a daughter, as a woman who made impossible choices in impossible circumstances." She didn't give details. She didn't name names. She spoke about dignity, about survival, about how judgment often comes easiest to those who have never had to choose between losing someone they love and losing a part of themselves. By the time she finished, the applause was standing. That night, Yi-min held her like he used to on the island, his voice thick. "You were incredible." "I was honest," she said, "for the first time without fear." The children noticed the shift too. Alina laughed more freely, slept more deeply. When strangers recognized her now, she didn't shrink, she nodded politely and kept walking. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Myra asked, "Do you think people can change forever?" Alina considered it. "I think people change in layers," she said, "some parts faster than others." "What about Dad?" Hannah asked. Yi-min chuckled. "What about me?" "You're nicer," Hannah said seriously, "but also scarier when you're mad." Alina laughed. "That's fair." Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Yi-min sat beside Alina on the couch, quiet. "You know," he said, "there was a time when I thought loving you was the most dangerous thing I'd ever done." "And now?" she asked. "And now, I think not loving you would have destroyed me." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We didn't just survive." "No," he agreed. "We rewrote it." Outside, the world kept turning. Loud, judgmental, unpredictable. Inside, they held something steady. And Alina knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that even if everything else was stripped away again, this time she would not be afraid. Because she knew who she was. And she knew who they were, together. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after Myra was born. It became quieter, slower, and in many ways harder, but it was real. They rented a modest house near the water, nothing like the glass towers Yi-min once ruled. Alina learned the rhythms of early motherhood on little sleep, packing the floor at night while the ocean whispered outside their windows. Yi-min woke every time Myra cried, no matter how exhausted he was, taking her gently, rocking her with an awkward patience that made Alina's chest ache. "You don't have to do every feeding," Alina whispered one night. "I know," he said softly. "I want to." He took a temporary consulting role under a different name, refusing to step back into the kind of power that had nearly destroyed them. Alina returned to her studies, juggling coursework with diapers and doctor visits for her mother, who had stabilized enough to join them abroad. For a while, the world left them alone. Then Alina got sick. It started as exhaustion she couldn't explain, nausea that lingered even after the nights got easier. She blamed stress, sleeplessness, everything except the truth. The test strip turned positive in seconds. She sat on the bathroom floor, staring at it, her hands shaking harder than they had the night of the auction. When she told Yimin, he laughed first, soft, disbelieving, and then cried, pulling her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted, "but I'm also happy." "So am I," he said, terrified but happy. Their second daughter arrived just over a year later, loud and stubborn from her first breath. They named her Hannah, meaning hope, because that was what she had felt like the moment Alina realized she wasn't alone anymore, not truly. Yimin changed in ways Alina hadn't expected. He learned patience. He learned how to lose an argument without needing to win it later. He learned how to kneel on the floor and let two small humans climb over him like he was a jungle gym. "You used to terrify entire boardrooms," Alina teased one afternoon as he lay pinned under Myra and Hannah. He smiled up at their daughters. "This is harder." They laughed more. They fought less. When they did fight, it wasn't about power or control. It was about fear, about protecting something fragile. Years passed. Alina finished nursing school and took shifts at a local clinic, finding comfort in helping others heal when her own life had once felt so broken. Yimin started a small business focused on ethical consulting, turning down lucrative contracts that smelled even faintly of the old world. Then, just when they allowed themselves to believe the past had loosened its grip, Alina's mother collapsed again. The diagnosis came back fast and brutal: recurrence, aggressive, unforgiving. Alina sat at her bedside, holding the same hand she had held in that first hospital years ago, her heart breaking in the same place. "I'm tired," her mother whispered one night, voice thin but peaceful. Alina shook her head. "Don't say that." "I'm not afraid," she said gently. "I saw you build a life. I saw my grandchildren laugh. I didn't think I'd get that." Yimin stood behind Alina, one hand resting steady on her shoulder. "I'm grateful," her mother continued, "even for the parts that hurt." She passed quietly 2 weeks later, with Alina and Yimin on either side of her bed. Grief didn't come all at once. It came in waves, in empty chairs, in recipes Alina couldn't bring herself to cook. Yimin never tried to fix it. He just stayed. 3 years after Myra's birth, Alina found out she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with laughter instead of fear. Their son arrived in the middle of a thunderstorm, loud and relentless, fists clenched like he was already ready to fight the world. They named him James, after no one special, because this time the name didn't need to carry history. They were a family. It was James who finally brought them back. "Just to visit," Yimin said one night, years after they had fled. "We don't have to stay." Alina hesitated. The thought of returning made her chest tighten. But something else stirred too: closure. They went quietly, no press, no announcements. The city looked the same and completely different. The hotel still stood where it always had, glass reflecting the sky like nothing had ever happened. Alina stopped across the street, her breath catching. "This is where it started," she said softly. Yimin nodded, and where it ended. They didn't go inside. They held hands and walked away. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to the coast where they had first hidden from the world. Just the two of them this time. No children, no obligations. "I didn't think we'd make it," Alina admitted as they watched the sun dip below the horizon. "Neither did I," Yimin said, "but I kept choosing you anyway." He took her hands, older now, familiar, steady. They renewed their vows with no witnesses, no promises about forever, just honesty. "Thank you," Alina whispered. For what? For seeing me when I didn't know how to see myself. He smiled, pressing his forehead to hers. You saved me too. Somewhere far away, a clock struck 0 again. But this time, it didn't mark the end of something. It marked how far they had come. The house was quieter than Alina ever remembered it being. Not empty, just calm. Morning light filtered through the curtains as she stood in the kitchen, fingers wrapped around a warm mug, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of birds outside. There had been a time when silence terrified her, when it meant waiting for bad news, waiting for something to break. Now silence meant peace. Yimin came up behind her, resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. His hair had gone almost completely gray, and she loved it. Loved the way time had softened him without dulling his strength. You're awake early, he murmured. So are you, she replied. I didn't sleep much. She turned slightly. Bad dreams. No, he said. Good memories. She smiled at that. Later that afternoon, the kids called. Myra from the hospital during a break between rotations. Hannah from an airport lounge halfway across the world. James from his workshop, where he was building something that would probably change shape 3 more times before it was finished. Each call ended the same way. I love you. Always. After the last call, Alina sat on the couch, phone resting on her chest, overwhelmed by a gratitude so heavy it almost hurt. Yimin noticed. You're crying, he said gently. Happy tears, she laughed softly. I think we did something right. He sat beside her. We did a lot of things wrong first. She nodded, but we didn't stop choosing better. That night, they walked along the beach where they had once renewed their vows, the sand cool beneath their feet, the ocean steady and endless. Do you remember what you said to me the night we married? Alina asked. Yimin thought for a moment. I said every future without you felt like a prison. She nodded. I still believe that. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Alina, if everything disappeared tomorrow, money, safety, comfort, would you still choose this life? She didn't hesitate. Yes. He exhaled, like he'd been holding that question for years. So would I. They stood there for a long moment, holding hands, the sound of waves filling the space between words. Alina thought back to the girl she had been, the one staring at a screen, heart racing, believing that one decision would define her forever. She wished she could reach back through time and tell her something. That you are more than the worst thing you ever did. That survival is not a crime. That love doesn't ask you to be perfect, only brave enough to stay. Yimin squeezed her hand. What are you thinking about? That I don't regret my story anymore, she said. Even the painful parts. He smiled softly. Me neither. As they walked back toward the house, Alina realized something else. Their story had never really been about the auction, or the money, or even the scandal. It had been about choice. Choosing love when fear was easier. Choosing honesty when silence felt safer. Choosing each other, again and again, when walking away would have hurt less in the moment. And that was the part she hoped people would understand. Not the shock, not the headlines, but the resilience. Later that night, Alina sat at her desk, opening her laptop one last time. She typed slowly, deliberately, finishing a final essay she'd been working on for weeks. She ended it with a single line. The thing that almost broke me became the foundation of everything I built. She closed the laptop and turned off the light. In the bedroom, Yimin was already asleep, breathing slow and even. Alina slid in beside him, fitting against him like she always had, like she always would. Outside, the ocean continued its endless rhythm. And somewhere in the world, someone was standing at the edge of an impossible decision, believing they were alone. Alina hoped this story would find them. Not to shock them, but to remind them that no matter how dark the beginning is, it does not get to decide how the story ends. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is choose to live, and then keep choosing it. Every single day. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to this story. If it moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about resilience and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. And remember, your past does not disqualify you from a future. It can be the very thing that leads you there. If this story moved you, made you feel something, or reminded you that second chances are real, please take a moment to like this video. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what moment stayed with you the most?